Hi English students, this is Mrs. Peacock, and at this point we need to talk about the poetry and short story essay. This is a literary analysis essay, and essentially the literary analysis means that you've read literature and you have your own interpretation about what the author intended, and you use literary elements to delve into the story. So the topics I have suggested here are different types of literary elements, and I'll explain each one as we go through this topic sheet. But if you have any questions, of course, always ask. The rough draft is going to be due Wednesday, October 18th by midnight in the discussion board, and of course you'll have those peer reviews just like you did for the research paper. Your final draft will be due Wednesday, October 25th by midnight in the Week 10 content folder, and this paper is worth 20% of your final grade, so not nearly as much as that research paper, but that's because this is a shorter paper. Your essay should be at least 800 words in length. That does count the works cited page. And I have a surprise for you on the works cited page. Your formatting is the same as before in that it needs to be 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced with MLA heading and style. Remember, page 192 in your Seagull book has a great example for MLA heading, and page 199 has a great example for the works cited page. You must have a works cited page with the literary works cited that you've chosen, but I have a gift. This second page has the citations done for you. I've done every citation for the literature, so you can literally copy and paste the citation onto your works cited page. So there's no excuse for completely forgetting that works cited page or trying to do some random website link or something like that. Please just use the citations that I have included on your topic sheet. I don't want any outside sources for this paper, and I'll explain why. I want to know your interpretation of the literature, not an interpretation you found online or in a book. I honestly just want to know what you thought as a reader about the literature that we've covered. And notice it is only about the literature that we've covered, even though I'm sure you've read other stories and poems that you would love to write about in other classes. I do want you to stick to only the ones that we've covered for 102. Here are some topic ideas for you to consider whenever you're picking your topic, and notice that this week's assignment is a topic proposal outline and discussion board. So I am going to review your topics and see what direction you're taking this paper. You could compare and contrast two characters. So for instance, for the birthmark, Elmer and Aminadab are very different characters. So if you wanted to compare and contrast their characteristics, same with Georgiana and Elmer, they're very different characters as well. Imagery essentially is how the author displays images and descriptions within the work. So emphasis on the descriptive details. So for instance, in the birthmark, he gets into the description of the laboratory and her boudoir and the images of the experiments that have gone wrong as far as the flower that falls apart and that sort of thing, or the birthmark itself. And so you can focus on the images within the story and how it leads to plot development and character development. Themes are essentially the ideas that the author focuses on. So for instance, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, obviously a major theme is death, but how it's communicated in the poem is very unique. So you could focus on 3 ways that death is illustrated within the poem. Some major themes for My Last Duchess would be jealousy. The Duke is obviously a very jealous husband. Control, and then also probably, I'm trying to think of a third, because if you can come up with 3 themes, of course, that's the easiest, because then you can do those 3 body paragraphs. Maybe murder, because I don't know if you caught it, My Last Duchess does center around a murder. If you didn't catch it, you may want to reread the poem, especially towards the end. All smiles stop together. That's the line I'm referring to. So, but you could focus on 3 themes within the work and use that to guide your 3 body paragraphs. That's a fun idea to do. Of course, there are several poems that focused on love. So if you wanted to focus on the 3 poems that really stood out to you about love, or even the short story technically deals with love with Elmer and Georgiana's marriage, even though it's a very toxic marriage. The ones that I see the most often for the love theme would be Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, and How Do I Love Thee, because all three of those are very obviously about love. My Last Duchess and The Birthmark have toxic love, so if you wanted to analyze that. But all of these authors illustrate love in a different way. Even Shakespeare, even though two of the works were both Shakespeare, the sonnets depict different types of love. Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day is a more traditional love, as far as he's comparing her to the summer day and thinks she's beautiful and lovely. And then My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun points out a lot of her flaws, but he loves her either way. It's a very honest depiction of what he sees in her. So it really just depends on what you want to focus on. Another topic idea is how the author's message is or is not relevant today. Some of these are dated. So for instance, My Last Duchess deals with a duke and duchess and a marriage that no longer really fits our modern day marriage system. Of course, if they were having issues today, they could have gotten a divorce, but historically that wasn't acceptable. So you could argue that that's not as relevant as today or for today. So it really just depends on which work you want to focus on, though. The Birthmark could be relevant today because sometimes we have a toxic relationship and you'll see the flaw in the person, and if it becomes an obsession, that flaw, then that definitely has a modern day relevance based off that idea. So really just depends on your interpretation as a reader. How the conclusion is foreshadowed. So foreshadowing is when the author provides hints on what's going to happen at the ending of the story or the poem. And so especially the Birthmark, there's a ton of hints that we know Georgiana's going to die. They literally call the Birthmark the fatal birthmark. All of his experiments fail and he's made her into his next experiment. Some of the experiments specifically deal with a flower that's bloomed and she touches it and it dies and withers. Even the dream he had, he said, it's in her heart now, we must have it out, speaking of the Birthmark. And so the fact that it's gotten a hold of her heart also illustrates and foreshadows that she will die during this operation. So I think that's one of the easiest ones to do for foreshadowing, but you could focus on 3 examples of foreshadowing to structure your 3 body paragraphs. Settings are essentially just where the story or poem has been set and kind of the scenery that surrounds the characters. Symbolism is when an item represents an idea. So for instance, flowers usually symbolize love, skulls symbolize death, and so on and so forth. But these poems and short story all have symbols within them. And if you focus on 3 symbols, that'll help structure those 3 body paragraphs. Death in the afterlife is especially apparent in Because I Could Not Stop for Death, because the main character, the speaker, is literally taking a carriage ride through to her grave. So you could analyze that one very thoroughly. And I've got the poems and short story we covered here on the literature options with the page numbers that are provided within your textbook. So also notice we have your citations done for you, already finished. All your final drafts will be used or graded with that same English 102 grading rubric that I did for the research paper, and that's on the Getting Started page of Blackboard. They'll also be scanned with the anti-plagiarism software, so just make sure you are writing your own interpretation of the story and poems and not someone else's interpretation. And of course, we have the final draft late submission rule. It's 10 points off every day late. And I have a section for brainstorming and outlining at the bottom. But please let me know if you have any questions. And don't forget, we have a fantastic writing center with tutors that can tutor you online or in person for these essays as well. So please let me know if you have any questions and have a wonderful day.